In this second part of Lecture 5, we pick up the question we ended with in the last video. The question of whether there's a final end or ultimate goal in our lives, a chief good that makes sense of all of the other ends or goals we pursue. Aristotle tackles this question in Book 1 of the Nicomachean Ethics, and he answers that there is a chief good, which he refers to as happiness. The Greek word here that we've come across earlier in this course is eudaimonia, and we'll spend some time considering the meaning of that term in this part of Lecture 5. This will lead us to the way Aristotle defines eudaimonia in a passage traditionally called the function argument in Chapter 7 of Book 1, and that will lead us, in turn, to the connection Aristotle draws between reason and virtue in living well. At the end of our last video, we noted how Aristotle is deeply concerned with understanding the good life in terms of the kinds of creatures we are as human beings. He begins the Nicomachean Ethics by observing that all of us, by nature, are end-seeking or goal-directed animals. This is true whether you're a general leading troops, a shopkeeper running a store, or a farmer tending to crops. All of these individuals are pursuing goals they think are good for them. This left us with a tantalizing new question. Is there a chief good or final end, what Aristotle refers to in Greek as a telos, that serves as the ultimate goal for all our goal-seeking behavior? Think about it. Is there one overarching purpose that can justify and give direction to all the diverse activities and ends we pursue in life? If such a final end exists, then achieving it would mean fulfilling or actualizing our very nature as human beings. It would be like reaching the pinnacle of what it means to be human. In what follows, we're going to see how Aristotle answers this question. Aristotle goes about providing a sketch of the human good early in the Nicomachean Ethics by pointing out that the ultimate goal of every human life is to live well or to do well. But he also recognizes that this isn't very illuminating because it applies to all forms of life. The question is, what does living well mean for us? Aristotle suggests that the end or telos of any activity we engage in is always some good, something we consider beneficial for us to achieve or obtain. So in achieving our ends, we're actualizing our potential. Now, if we were talking about trees, it would be simple to say what living well means for them. Trees have one set of goods: sunlight, water, nutrients. But for humans, the situation is much more complex. Consider all of the desires you have on a daily basis and the multitude of goals you've already pursued in your life. And now think about how each person will likely list different goods that matter to them as their own goals. Aristotle, however, is on a quest to identify a single chief good for us, an ultimate goal that justifies all our diverse activities and pursuits. And more than this, he's looking for a chief good that's the same for every human being, whether you're a general, a shopkeeper, a farmer, a professor like me, or a student like yourselves. To see what he has in mind here, consider the case of the general in wartime. You might think that the immediate end that they seek as their good is victory. But then you can keep asking why questions. Victory can be seen as a means to something else. Why then does the general seek victory? Well, perhaps it's for the sake of political status. But why do they seek political status? Maybe it's for the sake of power. But why does the general seek power? Aristotle's interested in whether all these ends or goals are pointing to a chief good, some final end or goal where it doesn't make much sense anymore to ask why does the general want that, because ultimately everyone wants that. This would be an end that's only ever an end and never also a means. Or, as Aristotle puts it, this is an end that's unconditionally complete, what is always intrinsically choice-worthy and never choice-worthy because of something else. But does such an unconditionally complete end exist? Is there really just one chief good for all human lives? Aristotle's answer is yes, there is such a final end, and that end is happiness, or eudaimonia. This is how he understands the good life for a human being. As he says in Chapter 4 of Book 1, about its name, most people are pretty much agreed, since both ordinary people and sophisticated ones say it's happiness, and they suppose that living well and doing well are the same as being happy. Later on in chapter 7 of book 1, he emphasizes that happiness seems to be most like this, a good that's intrinsically choice-worthy, since we always choose because of itself and never because of something else. The best way to think of eudaimonia here is as an umbrella concept, under which various other goods and ends can reside as part of any profession or way of life. Whether we're considering a general, a shopkeeper, a farmer, or a professor, each has unique goals and responsibility. The general might aim for victory, the shopkeeper for a thriving business, the farmer for a good harvest, and the professor for teaching and learning. All of these individual goals can be seen as on the path toward eudaimonia, toward a life that's unconditionally complete. So eudaimonia serves as a final end for any human life in that it's the ultimate justification for all our activities, whatever they may be. It's also inclusive because it can encompass a plurality of goods. It's explanatory because it provides a reason for why we seek these other goods. And it's informative because it gives us a standard by which to judge the worth of the different activities we pursue in our lives. When Aristotle says that happiness is intrinsically choice-worthy, then, he means it's the one thing we aim for that doesn't serve as a means to anything else. It's not just the end of the road, it's the entire journey, the complete total of all the good things in life, uniquely tailored to each individual, yet universal in its relevance. Now, as we examine Aristotle's idea of happiness, it's crucial to distinguish it from how we commonly understand happiness today. When we say we're happy, we often mean that we're feeling good in the moment, that we're experiencing a sense of well-being, or that we're generally cheerful. This view of happiness is largely subjective. It's about how you feel right now, or maybe how you tend to feel across many moments. But this is quite different from eudaimonia and the more holistic notion of well-being we've been considering in this course. Eudaimonia isn't about how you feel at any given moment. It's about the sum total of your life's activities. It involves a comprehensive assessment of how your life is going overall. The focus here isn't on feeling good. It's about the exercise of well-being in activities and relationships that matter to you. For this reason, scholars often translate eudaimonia as human flourishing, capturing the sense that it's about thriving in various dimensions of life, not just about feeling good. So when we talk about eudaimonia, we're not talking about feeling happy in the way that you feel when you eat your favorite meal or watch your favorite movie. We're talking about a way of being that results from a pattern of life choices. For Aristotle, this view of happiness, eudaimonia, isn't about fleeting moments of pleasure, it's about living in a way that fulfills our human potential. You can think of this as a difference between feeling happy and being happy. On the left, you see an image of people jumping for joy. This represents moments of feeling happy, of pure exhilaration. There's nothing wrong with these moments. They're great to experience and a natural part of human life. But Aristotle would argue that isolated moments of joy like these don't necessarily equate to a life well lived. On the right, you see an image of a doctor comforting a patient. This is an example of eudaimonia. The doctor may not be feeling happy in the sense of experiencing an emotional high. She's working and it may be a bit stressful as she deals with a patient's illness. But in doing work that matters to her, work that fulfills her potential and contributes to the well-being of others, she's happy in a deeper Aristotelian sense. This idea that there's a difference between feeling happy and being happy speaks to the different perspectives we can take on our lives. Consider this quote from the character Mickey in Woody Allen's movie Hannah and Her Sisters. "I was happy, I just didn't realize I was." This statement suggests that happiness isn't always something we're consciously aware of in the moment. It can be something we recognize in retrospect when we look back on our choices and actions. And the fact that this idea can be grasped even today shows that Aristotle is onto something here, something that all of us can relate to in our lives. Now, it's critical to note that Aristotle does not see these two notions of happiness, feeling happy and being happy, as mutually exclusive. They're not opposed to each other. They're just different aspects of human experience. In fact, as we'll see over the next couple of weeks, Aristotle believes that a life of eudaimonia should also include moments of feeling happy, of emotional well-being. The key point, though, is that you cannot reduce eudaimonia to just feeling happy. Feeling happy is part of the good life for Aristotle, but it's not the whole picture. And it's this richer, more holistic understanding of happiness that he believes we should strive for in seeking to live well. Before Aristotle proceeds to spell out his understanding of happiness further in the Nicomachean Ethics, he stops to consider a few candidates for the good life that many people might find appealing, but which he rejects. Let's take a look at each of these candidates and Aristotle's arguments against them. First up is the life of pleasure. While it might sound tempting, Aristotle dismisses this pretty quickly, saying it's characteristic of grazing cattle. The reason here is that he's looking for a distinctly human good, something that sets us apart from other animals. Pleasure alone doesn't cut it. Next, Aristotle considers the life of politics, which he understands as a life in pursuit of honor and recognition. His rejection of this candidate for the good life is interesting and might resonate with many of you in an age where social media likes and followers define many people's sense of self-worth. Aristotle's problem with this vision of the good life is that it's not fully within our control, since it depends on others to honor us, and the goodness of our lives cannot be outsourced to other people's opinions and judgments. Remember, what we're looking for here is an account of happiness that's unconditionally complete, a life that stands on its own without needing validation from others. So a life devoted to seeking recognition and status fails Aristotle's test for eudaimonia. Then there's the life of money-making, and again Aristotle is clear. Wealth is useful, but it cannot be the ultimate end of life. Money is paradigmatically a good that we seek for the sake of acquiring other things. It's always only an instrumental good, whereas Aristotle wants to identify an intrinsic good. Finally, Aristotle considers the life of contemplation, a life dedicated to intellectual pursuits. Now, this is a bit of a cliffhanger because Aristotle tables this discussion in Book 1 until the very end of the Nicomachean Ethics in Book 10. There, he suggests that if we were gods, a life of contemplation would be the best life. But we're not gods. We're human, social beings with needs and responsibilities. So for Aristotle, while contemplation might be an ideal, it's not the whole picture of a good human life, at least for the vast majority of us. All of this discussion about what the good life is not helps us get closer to understanding what Aristotle believes the good life is. By ruling out these other candidates, we get a clearer sense of the contours of eudaimonia, of what it means to live well given the kinds of creatures we are. First, the good life for a human being must be something that's uniquely human. This rules out the life of pleasure, which Aristotle thinks is too similar to the lives of other animals. It might also rule out the life of contemplation as the ultimate human good, since such a life would only be ideal if we were gods, which, last time I checked, we're not. Second, the good life has to be something that we achieve, something over which we have control. This is important because it rules out the life of politics or honor. Your eudaimonia cannot depend on someone else's opinion or recognition. It has to be something that you can take ownership of. Third, the good life has to be an end that is pursued always and only for its own sake. This rules out the life of money-making, since the pursuit of wealth is generally for the sake of something else. Finally, Aristotle adds another feature. Eudaimonia involves activity. You can't be said to be living a good life if you're asleep all the time or inactive. Living well on this view involves engaging in activities that matter to us and that we find fulfilling. As we move forward then, keep these criteria in mind. The human good for Aristotle must be distinctively human, self-determined, pursued for its own sake, and actively lived. It's a high bar to meet, but also a compelling vision of a meaningful life. So where does Aristotle go from here? Well, he says we still need to be more specific in identifying the human good. As he puts it, to say that happiness is the best good is perhaps to say something that is apparently commonplace. and we still need a clearer statement of what it is. Maybe this then would come about if the function of a human being were grasped. What follows in Chapter 7 of Book 1 of the Nicomachean Ethics is a fascinating line of reasoning that scholars of ancient philosophy usually call the function argument. Aristotle proposes that we can get a clearer understanding of what human happiness is if we determine the function, or ergon in Greek, of a human being. Now, the term function here doesn't mean what it does in a modern context. Aristotle's not talking about grasping a mechanical or utilitarian function for a human life. He's referring to the unique kind of work we engage in as human beings, the characteristic set of activities that defines what it is to be a human being, which distinguishes us from other beings. Understanding this function, Aristotle thinks, could unlock the secret to identifying the ultimate good for humans, the purpose that fulfills our unique nature and capabilities. So this leads us to one of the most famous and debated arguments in the history of philosophy. The text is dense, and I encourage you to read it closely. For our purposes, I've reconstructed Aristotle's argument here as a sequence of steps to make it easier to digest. Let's start with the initial steps in the argument. Step 1 is that the good of something lies in its distinctive function, or ergon. Step 2 is that the highest good of something lies in it performing its function well. Aristotle believes that all things in nature have a function, or work, that they're uniquely suited for, and doing that function well is the ultimate good for each organism. He then wants to apply this idea to human beings on the assumption that we also have a distinctive function or work to carry out, given the kinds of organisms we are. So Aristotle reasons here in steps 3 and 4 that there is such a thing as the human function, and that the good of a human being lies in this function. Step 4 follows from steps 1 and 3. If every organism has a good that lies in its function or work, then there should be a specific kind of activity that we engage in as humans, and it's in this activity that we'll find our chief good. But that then raises a crucial question. What is the human function? Aristotle doesn't leave us hanging. He works out his answer through a process of elimination. He considers 3 different capabilities or powers we have as human beings: the power of growth and nutrition, the power of sense perception, and the power of reason. And he argues that the function of plant life is nutrition and growth, but that's not distinctively human, so it should be eliminated. Similarly, non-human animals have the power of sense perception, but that's not unique to us either, so it should be eliminated as well. What sets humans apart is our capacity for rational activity. So this means the human function lies in rational activity. Putting all of this together, we arrive at the conclusion: the highest human good lies in rational activity performed well. This follows from steps 2, 4, and 5. So for Aristotle, the secret to human happiness, to eudaimonia, lies in living a life where our rational faculties are not just engaged, but engaged well. This then is Aristotle's basic argument concerning the human function in Chapter 7 of Book 1, which leads him to conclude that happiness, eudaimonia, consists in rational activity performed well. Aristotle then makes a further move near the end of the chapter that's crucial to his overall view. Rational activity performed well is rational activity performed excellently. And the Greek word for excellence, as we noted in the last video, is arete. This is a word in Greek that also means virtue, which for Aristotle includes all the ethical and civic virtues that would have been familiar to his contemporaries and that remain familiar to us today. Virtues like justice and courage and moderation. So to say that happiness is rational activity performed well for Aristotle is also to say that it's rational activity that's performed in accordance with virtue. But now we come across a new interpretive problem. How does this follow? Why does Aristotle think it's obvious that perfecting our rational nature will also involve using our rational nature justly, courageously, and moderately. Why does he think that reason and virtue necessarily go hand in hand? Let's consider this objection to Aristotle's view more closely. He's telling us that happiness, or eudaimonia, consists in rational activity performed well. Now, there are two central features of this account that we need to interrogate. First, what exactly does Aristotle mean by rational activity? And how might his understanding differ from ours? Second, why does Aristotle believe that performing this activity well means acting in accordance with virtue? This second question is especially key because Aristotle's contemporaries recognized, and we today recognize, that the human intellect can be employed for both virtuous and vicious ends. Take, for example, the iconic figure of Odysseus in Greek myth from Homer's Odyssey. Odysseus is the quintessential wise man in the Homeric world, employing his intellect to navigate challenges like the dangerous sirens while he's lost at sea. But by the time of Aristotle, a couple of centuries after the Homeric epics were composed, the character of Odysseus is re-evaluated in Greek tragedies. On the right here, you see Odysseus portrayed in a play, the Philoctetes, by the Greek playwright Sophocles, where he's trying to steal a magical bow from a disabled veteran he's left stranded on an island during the Trojan War. At the point when Plato and Aristotle are doing philosophy then, Odysseus is no longer a positive role model or hero in the Greek world. Instead, his intellectual ability is viewed with deep suspicion. Fast forward to our own era and consider again Walter White from the TV show Breaking Bad, an example we touched on earlier in this course. Here's a man of considerable intellect who uses his mental acumen for nefarious ends, transitioning from a mild-mannered high school chemistry teacher to a ruthless drug kingpin. So both Aristotle's audience and we today can agree, intelligence alone does not make a person good. Why then is Aristotle so confident that the perfection of our rational faculties will lead us to a virtuous life? This is obviously a question we need to explore as we seek to understand his conception of the good life. The answer to this question requires that we examine more carefully how Aristotle thinks of our rational nature. The crucial point to appreciate is that for Aristotle, human beings are rational animals because they're political animals. This is a central theme in Aristotle's thought, and it provides an elegant solution to the interpretive problem we've been grappling with in examining the connection he draws between reason and virtue. As political animals, for Aristotle, we humans display four key features. First, we're creatures whose lives, beliefs, and values are deeply informed by our activities within societies. We don't exist in isolation. We're members of communities, and it's within these communities that we find the arena for our rational activities. Second, as political animals, we engage in shared pursuits and commitments. Our rational activities are not only individual endeavors, but collective projects that involve others. Third, our social activity is not arbitrary. It's shaped by the roles we inhabit in our lives, be it as a son or daughter, a student, a teammate, a citizen, or a friend. These roles come with responsibilities and expectations that we strive to meet. Fourth, excelling in these roles isn't just about going through the motions. It involves the giving and taking of reasons with others. It's a rational process, one that requires us to justify our actions and decisions, to listen, and to adapt. This is where the idea of virtue enters the equation. Virtues like justice, courage, and moderation for Aristotle are not just norms we must obey in polite company. They are essential to the perfection of our social nature. As the social psychologists Jonathan Haidt and Craig Joseph put it, virtues are social skills. To possess a virtue is to have extended and refined one's abilities to perceive morally relevant information so that one is fully responsive to the local socio-moral context. So, for Aristotle, perfecting our rational nature isn't just about sharpening our intellectual abilities. It's about honing these social skills, these virtues that enable us to live well with others in a community. In this way, reason and virtue are not just incidental companions. They are intertwined facets of our complex human nature. To get a handle on this connection between the pursuit of virtue and the social roles we inhabit, try a quick exercise right now. You will do a longer version of this in putting Aristotle's theory of the good life into practice in a couple of weeks. Consider a role you occupy that matters especially to you. It could be as a friend, a sibling, a student, a bandmate, an athlete, a role that you identify with. Think for a bit about what that role requires and what it means to you. Now, take a look at this list of virtues and character strengths, both ancient and modern. Virtues like acceptance, courage, forgiveness, gratitude, justice, integrity, loyalty, trust, and so on. Reflect on which of these virtues would help you excel in the role you've chosen. Which qualities would make you not just competent, but exceptional in the role you've identified? Chances are you'll find many, if not most of these virtues are worth cultivating in connection with your chosen role. If that's the case, then you're starting to grasp the essence of Aristotle's argument. He's urging us to see that these virtues are not just arbitrary moral constructs or ethical formalities. They are, in fact, deeply ingrained in our rational and social natures. They enable us to engage more fully and meaningfully in the communities that we belong to contribute to shared pursuits, and to reason together about matters of value. In short, these virtues help us actualize our rational potential in the various roles and relationships that make up our lives. They are the social skills that lead to happiness in the Aristotelian sense of eudaimonia. That concludes Lecture 5. In this part of the lecture, we've considered in more detail the nature of human happiness as eudaimonia in Aristotle's theory. We've explored what Aristotle thinks eudaimonia is not, and we also then considered what he thinks it is by examining the function argument he puts forward in Chapter 7 of Book 1 of the Nicomachean Ethics, where he defines eudaimonia as rational activity in accordance with virtue. That then led us to a discussion of our rational nature and how Aristotle thinks we can perfect our nature through the development of virtue. In our next lecture, we'll explore in some depth what virtue is exactly for Aristotle and how it is that we develop a virtuous character. As we'll see, Aristotle thinks of virtue as something like a craft, and next week you'll test that metaphor by engaging in a craft that matters to you. I hope you enjoy the activity and look forward to hearing how it goes for you.